I never paid attention to receipt. That feels important to say now. Because attention changes things. Back then, receipts were just paper. Thin, light, easy to forget. They appeared, did their job, and disappeared again. I liked that about them. My life worked the same way. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Mornings came with the sound of the same alarm, soft and tired, as if it didn't expect me to jump out of bed. I let it ring longer than most would. I liked the way the sound filled the room slowly, pressing against the walls before fading. The apartment was quiet. Not empty. Just still. I could hear the building breathing, pipes shifting, a distant elevator cable humming. Somewhere far away, traffic started early like it always did, but it never reached me fully. It arrived softened, filtered. I lived alone, and I had learned the difference between alone and lonely. Lonely asks questions. Alone doesn't. I moved through the morning without thinking. Bare feet on cold floor tiles. The faint chill climbing into my legs. The smell of detergent from the clean clothes folded the night before. Coffee came next. The same cup. The same water. Steam fogged the window slightly, blurring the street outside. Shapes moved behind the glass. Cars. People. Nothing distinct enough to matter. Routine did not require clarity. When I left the apartment, I locked the door once. Always once. The hallway light flickered near the stairwell. It always had. I never reported it. Some things earn their place by staying broken in predictable ways. Outside, the air felt neutral, neither cold nor warm. The city hadn't decided what it wanted to be yet. I walked the same route every day. I could have taken shortcuts. I never did. The coffee shop sat on the corner, its windows glowing softly, not bright enough to announce itself, but bright enough to reassure. Inside, everything smelled the same every morning. Burnt coffee, clean surfaces, something sweet lingering behind it all, like a promise that never fully delivered. I waited in line, listened to fragments of conversations that weren't meant for me. A laugh behind me, someone clearing their throat. The floor tiles were warm near the counter, heated from below. I noticed that more than I noticed people. When it was my turn, I ordered what I always ordered. No variations. No additions. The barista nodded, hands moving automatically. I paid. I waited. The printer chirped briefly. A mechanical sound. Efficient. Unemotional. I took the cup. The warmth pressed gently into my palm. I stepped aside. Only then did I see the receipt. It was taped to the cup, folded once, as if it wanted to stay close. At first, I didn't read it. I never did. But my eyes caught something familiar in the shape of the letters. My name, printed clearly at the top. Correct spelling. No hesitation. I stood there longer than necessary, the noise of the cafe moving around me. Cups clinking. A chair scraping softly across the floor. Someone coughing near the door. My name looked strange on the paper. Not wrong. Just exposed. I felt a small tightening in my chest. Not fear. More like surprise arriving late. I assumed I had said my name out loud. People do that without noticing. The explanation slipped into place easily. I peeled the receipt off the cup. The adhesive made a quiet sound as it separated. Sticky. Reluctant. The paper was warm. I folded it once and slid it into my pocket without thinking. Outside, the air felt slightly cooler. The city had moved forward without me while I stood inside. I walked on. At work, the day passed as days usually did. Emails. Screens. The soft hum of electricity everywhere. My name appeared in places it belonged. On messages. On documents. Seeing it there felt normal. By the time evening came, the morning had softened in my memory. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store. Bright lights, clean floors, a familiar smell of cardboard and produce. I picked up the same things I always did. Nothing extra. At the register, the cashier barely looked at me. I paid. The printer made its sound again. This time, I noticed it immediately. The receipt slid out. My name waited at the top. I felt it before I fully understood it, a faint warmth spreading behind my ribs, a sense of recognition that didn't belong to me. I stood there, holding the paper between my fingers. The ink was slightly raised. Fresh. I didn't say anything. I thanked the cashier. That felt important. Outside, night had already settled in. At home, I emptied my pockets onto the table. Keys, phone, 2 receipts. I placed them side by side without knowing why. They looked too similar. Same font. Same alignment. I told myself that meant nothing. I folded them carefully and placed them into the small bowl by the door, where loose things went to wait for a decision. Then I turned off the light. At that moment, everything still felt normal. That was the last time it truly did. The next morning, I left the apartment feeling the same weight in the air, neutral and steady, as if nothing had changed. I walked the familiar route, the chill of the tiles under my feet pressing gently into my toes, reminding me that the world was indifferent, that nothing waited and nothing judged. The coffee shop was the same, glowing faintly through the windows, humming softly in a way that seemed almost alive. The bell above the door jingled as I entered, the sound sharper than it had been yesterday. The barista nodded at me automatically, hands moving fluidly over the counter, and I placed my order without hesitation. The sound of the coffee machine filled the space, a slow rhythm, a pulse I could feel pressing in my chest. Then the receipt appeared. Folded once, taped to the cup. My eyes found it instantly. My name. Again. It felt heavier this time, though it was the same paper, the same black ink. There was something different in the space around it. The air felt slightly thicker. My fingers itched to touch it, to confirm that it was real. I assumed I had spoken my name louder than I realized. But there had been no voice. I held it in my hand, warm from the cup beneath. My heartbeat seemed to echo in the small, tiled cafe. I noticed the way the light caught the edges of the paper, creating a faint shadow that didn't belong. I left without speaking. Outside, the city seemed quieter than usual. Cars moved more softly. The distant hum of traffic was muffled, like it was far away, somewhere I couldn't reach. I felt eyes watching, not from people, but from the spaces between them. At work, my day stretched as usual. Emails arrived. Documents piled up. My name appeared on messages I hadn't written, forms I hadn't touched. I told myself it was coincidence. It was always coincidence. By the evening, I had forgotten the morning receipt, until I found another one in my pocket, folded neatly, waiting. This one wasn't from the coffee shop. It was from the convenience store on the corner, the one with flickering fluorescent lights that hummed and buzzed softly in patterns I could almost follow. I hadn't bought anything there that day. Yet the receipt had my name printed at the top. I stared at it. The letters were identical to yesterday's. The same font. The same spacing. A small part of me wanted to tear it up immediately. I didn't. I carried it with me the rest of the day. The city outside the window felt thicker, slower, as if it had noticed me holding the paper. On my way home, I passed the McDonald's. The golden arches glowed in the night, unwavering, as though the sun had never set. Inside, through the darkened windows, I could see the drive-through lights flickering softly. But the lights never went out. Not even briefly. I felt a pull. Not curiosity. Not fear. Something quieter. More insistent. I continued walking. At home, I placed the receipts side by side. 2 from the same day. Both carrying my name. I tried to explain it. Perhaps a glitch in the printer. A mistake. A coincidence repeated twice. The rational part of my mind whispered, nothing else matters. But another part, the one I didn't acknowledge, felt the tightening in my chest return. That subtle pressure in my lungs. That sense that the world knew more about me than it should. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the light from the street lamp outside cutting through the blinds in thin, steady lines. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself that tomorrow it would stop. But deep down I knew it wouldn't. The paper rested on the table next to my bed, folded neatly. My name, printed clearly, staring at me even in the dark. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. Outside, the city breathed around me. Slow, relentless, and I felt the first real stirrings of unease. The next morning, I woke to the sound of the coffee machine in my apartment, though I hadn't plugged it in. I lay still, listening. The hum was faint, almost imperceptible, vibrating through the floorboards and into my chest. I told myself it was the neighbors, or the city settling, or my imagination. I dressed slowly, every movement deliberate, as if I could negotiate with the day by taking it cautiously, step by step. Outside, the streets looked the same. Yet there was a rhythm to the city I hadn't noticed before. People moved in small, precise patterns, almost rehearsed. A man crossing the street always glanced to his left, then right, then straight ahead. A woman on a bicycle followed the same path through the intersection, pedals clicking in exact timing. I felt my pulse synchronize, unwillingly, with their movements. I passed the same coffee shop. The barista nodded. The machine hummed. And the receipt appeared. My name, printed clearly. I didn't speak. I didn't reach out. I kept walking. Later, at the convenience store, another receipt waited inside my pocket before I even approached the counter. This one, folded the same way as yesterday, had an extra line, a small item I hadn't purchased. A pack of gum. I had never bought gum in years. The city's lights outside the window felt wrong. They glowed just slightly too long, just slightly too bright, reflecting in puddles that weren't there before. The street smelled faintly of oil and rain, a familiar combination that suddenly felt uncanny, as if the ordinary had been shifted slightly off-center. I walked past the McDonald's again. The drive-through lights glowed through the night. I could see the cars moving, the people inside, all following silent patterns. Not one of them looked at me. Not one of them blinked unnaturally. Yet I felt they knew I was watching. I went to my apartment and sat at the kitchen table. I lined up the receipts. 1, 2, 3. Every day the same. My name printed on every slip of paper, each one folded identically. The extra items appeared again, different each time, always things I hadn't purchased. I tried reasoning with myself. A prank. A glitch. Someone following me. But none of these explanations fit. It was impossible to find a pattern, yet there was a pattern. The receipts arrived at intervals I couldn't predict, always after small routines, always after I touched nothing unusual. I touched one receipt. My fingers felt the warmth from the coffee cup it had accompanied, even though the cup was long gone. The paper felt alive, not in movement, but in presence. I began keeping a journal. Every receipt, every time, every detail, and then I noticed it. The items printed on the receipts were things I had considered purchasing. Things I had glanced at, hesitated over, then put back. Items I had thought about in passing, without intent. It wasn't just coincidence. It was observation. It was awareness. I started leaving receipts on my desk, stacking them neatly. The pile grew slowly, each one adding weight to the air, pressing into my shoulders. The city outside pulsed quietly, unconcerned, unchanging. I realized that my routines had changed. I timed my steps. I checked my pockets. I slowed my breathing. I waited. But the receipts did not wait. The coffee shop, the convenience store, the McDonald's drive-thru. They all moved on their own schedule, unbound by my hesitation. My attempts to anticipate, to control, to pause the unfolding, were useless. At night, when I lay in bed, I traced the list of items on each receipt with my finger. Every imagined desire, every fleeting thought, every impulse, and the sense of being known deepened. A quiet, relentless pressure in my chest, a subtle tightening in my lungs, a whispering in the space just beyond hearing. I no longer looked out the window. I no longer went past the McDonald's. I did not visit the stores. Yet I received the receipt. Each one a little more precise. Each one a little heavier in my hand. I started to fear opening my wallet, opening my door, even blinking, because the city, the streets, the air, everything knew when I would. And it responded. I sat at my kitchen table for what felt like hours, staring at the latest receipt. Its edges were crisp, the paper still warm, and my name printed perfectly at the top. I turned it over slowly, as if examining every fiber could reveal some hidden mistake, some flaw that would make it ordinary. But there was nothing. I felt a tightness in my chest, the slow, insistent pressure of being watched even in the quiet of my own apartment. My eyes drifted to the clock. Its hands moved normally, but the second hand seemed hesitant, dragging slightly, a subtle pause I could not explain. I tried to remember the last time I had made a choice freely, without thinking about whether the receipts would follow. Every minor action now carried weight. Every thought could become a line on paper I had not asked for. I walked to the window. The street below was dim, dotted with the familiar glow of McDonald's lights that never turned off. Cars moved steadily, humans inside them silent and predictable. I imagined them noticing me, though their faces showed nothing. I imagined the receipts forming in their hands instead of mine, an invisible chain stretching across the city. I wanted to reason. I tried. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I had left my card somewhere. Maybe the machines at the stores had memorized my name. But each theory crumbled the moment I remembered. The extra items I never chose, the times I hadn't even entered a store. I thought about calling someone, a friend, the store, the police, but I stopped myself. Every possible action felt like an experiment I could not afford. Once I spoke, once I acted, it could change everything. And what if I was already too late? The receipts began to feel like more than paper. They were reminders, tiny, weightless admonitions that I had moved, or thought, or existed, and it had been recorded. I traced the items with my fingertips again, noting the subtle differences, the tiny details that aligned perfectly with my fleeting intentions. I drank water slowly, each sip deliberate, as if the liquid itself could wash away the inevitability pressing down on me. But it didn't. The air in the room seemed heavier, carrying a faint scent of fries from somewhere I could not locate. The lights flickered gently, or maybe it was my eyes playing tricks. Shadows stretched across the walls, stretching longer than the angle of the light could justify. My apartment was empty, yet it felt crowded. I thought about the city. Every McDonald's, every store, every place I had ever been, the lights steady, the receipts waiting. I realized I had begun mapping the patterns in my mind, unconsciously, like a mathematician tracking a sequence he cannot fully solve. I sat back in my chair and exhaled. The tightness in my chest did not ease. My thoughts were restless, circling, unable to find a conclusion. I tried to ignore the receipts, to close the drawer where I kept them, to bury my attention elsewhere. But they called to me, not with sound, but with presence. A subtle insistence, a vibration I could feel in my fingertip. I considered stopping going out, never leaving my apartment, never breathing outside the controlled space I had created. It seemed rational, safe. Yet even this choice felt meaningless, because the receipts did not wait for me. They arrived regardless. They followed the rhythms of my day, slipping into my pocket, appearing under the tiles inside my jacket. And I understood fully that any decision, any attempt to control my life, was already observed, already accounted for, already recorded. The room felt colder, not from temperature, but from the awareness pressing against me. I shivered slightly, though I was perfectly warm. The sound of a car passing outside made my heart jump, though the street had always been busy. I began to speak aloud, testing my voice, forming sentences to reason with the inevitability, as if talking could interrupt the pattern. Why is this happening? What do you want? The words sounded hollow. I knew the answer would never come. Yet I could feel the weight of the unseen eyes, patient, deliberate, waiting for me to make a move that could not be undone. And I realized the true terror. It wasn't the receipts themselves. It was the knowledge that my choices were no longer mine. That even the smallest, most mundane action, breathing, blinking, walking to the kitchen, was part of something larger, unchangeable, inescapable. I sank back into the chair. My hands rested on the table, touching the cold surface, tracing invisible lines between the receipt. I had to do something. I had to act. But every action felt wrong. And I understood. The longer I waited, the more inevitable it became. Handle. It seemed so ordinary. So simple. Just a drawer. Just paper. Yet every nerve in my body whispered caution, as if the receipts themselves were watching, measuring my hesitation. The apartment was silent. Not empty silence, but the kind that presses in, making your own breath too loud, making the tick of the clock unbearable. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the faint buzz of the lights above, the soft creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. I had a choice. I could leave the drawer closed and ignore it, try to pretend nothing was wrong. Or I could open it and confront them. The receipts, the inevitable. I chose the drawer. The handle was cold, smooth under my fingertip. I pulled it slowly, deliberately, letting it move with a soft scrape against the wood. The drawer opened. Inside, the receipts were stacked neatly, as if waiting for inspection. Each one bore my name. Each one reflected a moment I had already lived, a choice I had already made. I picked one up. The paper was light, fragile, but it carried the weight of certainty. I looked at it and felt the tiny pulse of panic. Not a sudden shock, but a slow tightening creeping from my chest to my hands, to the back of my neck. I could see what I had bought, what I had eaten, what I had touched. And I remembered. Some of these moments were not mine to begin with. I considered leaving. To walk away, to pretend I had never opened the drawer. But the moment felt fleeting. I could sense the weight of the city outside, the streets glowing with endless McDonald's lights, the hum of machines and receipts waiting. I was part of it. I had always been part of it. So I stayed. I pulled another receipt. Another small stack. Each one told the story of the past week, the past month, the past few days. My life recorded in minutiae. Sandwiches I hadn't wanted, fries I hadn't eaten, drinks I hadn't ordered. Yet here they were, documented, undeniable. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips as I traced the edges, as if the act of touching them was a betrayal, or maybe a confirmation. I felt an absurd, crushing responsibility to acknowledge them, as though ignoring them would undo something irreversibly set in motion. I thought about burning them. I even considered shredding them, but the thought made my hands tremble. I knew, somehow, that destruction would not erase what was already written. It would not stop the process. The receipts were not just paper. They were inevitability given form. I put them back in the drawer. Slowly. Each one replaced with exact care, exactly as it had been. My fingers lingered over the top of the pile, hesitating, as if even touching them too long could shift the balance. And then I closed the drawer. Softly, deliberately, as if sealing a secret that was never mine to keep. I stepped back, my chest tight, my hands cold. My apartment felt smaller now. The silence pressed harder. The lights flickered ever so slightly, or maybe it was just my eyes. I wanted to speak, to reassure myself that I had made the right choice. But the words stuck in my throat. I realized then that the choice itself, the simple act of opening that drawer, had changed something. Perhaps it had always been destined. Perhaps it had been waiting for me to act. And there was no going back. No undoing the slow, quiet acknowledgement that my life was recorded, observed, catalogued in ways I could not control. I exhaled, slow and deliberate, feeling the weight of inevitability settle over me like a cold sheet. The city outside continued its quiet, ordered rhythm. The McDonald's lights glowed steadily. The receipts waited. And I understood that some choices, no matter how small, carry consequences that stretch far beyond their simplicity. I sat down, letting the chair creak beneath me. My hands rested in my lap. The drawer remained closed, yet I could feel the presence behind it. Silent, patient, unyielding. I had acted. That was enough. Or perhaps it was too much. The drawer was closed, yet I could still feel it. Not physically, but as a presence, a subtle pressure against the back of my mind. I sat in the chair, my fingers brushing against the fabric of my pants, noticing the way the threads felt rough under my skin. The apartment was still. Not silent, exactly, but every sound was magnified. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint whir of the air vent, the distant buzz of traffic outside, they all felt intentional, deliberate, as if they were aware of me, observing me. I tried to move on. I poured myself a glass of water, the ice clinking against the glass like small, pointed warnings. I sipped, feeling the cold trail down my throat. Even this ordinary act, the water, the ice, the glass, felt too intimate, too watched. I thought about leaving, stepping outside, walking past the streets lined with lights that never dimmed, past the drive-thrus and fast food signs, past the endless receipts waiting for someone to notice them. But the thought felt hollow. I knew the world outside would not let me escape. It was patient. It waited. I sat longer. My eyes kept flicking to the drawer, to the spot where the receipts lay hidden, but palpable. I imagined them stacked neatly, each one with my name, each one marking moments I hadn't fully claimed, moments I hadn't fully understood. The hum of the city filtered through the walls, the perpetual glow of lights, the quiet rhythm of the night. I felt the subtle vibration in the floorboards, the pulse of life continuing outside, indifferent, uncaring. I realized then that the choice I had made, so small, so seemingly trivial, could not be reversed. It had settled into the fabric of my life, invisible yet undeniable. I leaned back, feeling the chair press into my spine. My eyes traced the ceiling, the pattern of the cracks in the paint, the way the light from the street outside slipped through the blinds in thin, trembling lines. Time felt stretched, elastic. The present folded over itself. No one would notice, no one would care. And yet, somehow, I did. I reached for my phone, thought about scrolling, checking, trying to find some reassurance. But I stopped. I didn't want to. The act of knowing, even partially, seemed heavier than the ignorance I had lived with before. I exhaled slowly, deliberately. Let the air leave my lungs as if it could carry away the feeling, the weight, the inevitability. But it didn't. It never would. I rose from the chair, moved to the window. The city stretched before me, lights glowing endlessly, streets moving with quiet purpose. Somewhere, a McDonald's sign shone brighter than the rest, unblinking, unyielding. I could almost feel the receipts, the stacks, the documentation of choices I hadn't intended, quietly watching me from every corner, every counter, every transaction. I returned to the chair. Saturday. Hands in my lap. Eyes unfocused. My breath matched the slow rhythm of the world outside. And then I waited. No sound. No movement. Only the hum, the glow, the quiet insistence of what had already been done. I had acted. That was all there was. And in the stillness, I realized it would not be undone. The drawer stayed closed. The city stayed lit. And I stayed. Silent. Waiting.